and we're responding to popular demand for this forum. We usually do one forum a month. This is Sierra Nevada Forums, and we pick a variety of topics. Our first one was the ACA, and that drew quite a few people, and that made us realize what this community really needs are nonpartisan forums that rely and vet their research to make sure that things are good to go and people aren't misled the way they are possibly on TV channels that we don't want to mention at this point in time. But that's the goal of this, is people are getting tired of hearing scare tactics and whatnot that really drove away from the core issues of important topics. So we decided to take that on, and we're regretting it now because people have come up with all sorts of things. Just to give you an idea, you guys think it's funny. I'm going to have a list of volunteers here. You guys are going to sign up. All right. So, like for example, here are the ones that we're going to be doing after we take a break in December. December ones are hard for people to get to. So we're going to try voting issues in January. In February, stop Big Pharma greed. March, climate action, as opposed to climate change. In April, we're going to do homelessness and justice reform. And in May, sustainability. If you are not getting our forum notifications electronically, then sign up on that sheet that's in the door by where you came in. We'll take your email and we'll make sure that when we formulate one of these forums, we'll get a flyer out to you for your review, okay? Now I lost my place, just a minute. Okay, important things here. The exits are right over here and the door that you came in on. And the bathrooms are up and over this way to my left and to your right. But it'll be to your left once you get up the stairs. So just keep that in mind. They're around the corner by the big, ugly looking chair. That's where they are. Don't sit on the chair. It's the bathroom. Bathrooms across the hall. All right. What else do I need to give you guys? Oh, all right. We usually allow time for questions at the end of the forum. Sometimes we take them just orally with the microphone going around. And other times we have people write a question on an index card, and then we turn them in. They vet them here to make sure we're taking out duplications or things that just aren't appropriate. Sometimes we know who you are. Those things happen. So you'll see the gals with a little Easter basket. You want to hold that up again? Just hold up your hand if you have a question. We'll get you a little golf card and a little golf pen, those little things, and then a little index card. We'll vet them up here and then we'll answer. What we find is that it keeps people from going on a diatribe, taking them 10 minutes to explain their question, and we get through a lot more questions that way. Make sense? Yes. Okay, thank you. Way to participate. We also would like to ask a favor of you. We have a very small grant from Nevada Humanities that helps support this program, and you usually ask me to provide testimonials in the grant. So if you have a little testimonial that you want to do on an index card at the entrance table, again, on your way out, just something to the impact that this was great, very educational on the topic of electrification of Nevada through transportation, okay? That would be nice for you to help us out that way. Okay, MailChimp, feel our pain. None of us are particularly computer people, but we've found that MailChimp is one of those programs that can help us do some things we need to do on our website, which is that right there encompasses my knowledge of the whole thing. So if anybody is adept at MailChimp and would like to help a sister out in training us, that would be great, or just do the work for us, that'd be fine too. It does not take a lot of time, but you might make us look a lot better than we normally do. All right, that's all the notifications. Now I can go into introducing Brian Beffort, and you're over here, right? Where'd you go?
Right here.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Brian, I'll be introducing Brian. He'll be the moderator for tonight, and then he will be introducing his illustrious peers over here. But I can tell you their names, just so you're not just, waiting. We have David Bobzien. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Bobzien.
Oh, okay, so the E is silent. Okay, fine. Got it. Lauren Rosenblatt, right there. Okay, we're gonna like this next one. Tom Polikalis, as opposed to Tom Pocahontas, who lives in Jersey. All right. So now let's get to Brian's. You know what? I really like Brian's resume. I'm not much of a resume person per se, but he did not mention one educational institution that he attends. What he did do is he gave us what he's been doing with his life. Because oftentimes they don't connect, as we all know. You get a degree in philosophy and you end up on a dairy farm or something. But I'm going to read this to you, and I think you'll find it very inspiring. Born at Washoe Medical Center, but raised in the Bay Area, Brian has been working on environmental issues in Nevada and the Sierras for more than 20 years. After 3 years as the outdoors editor for the Reno Gazette-Journal, he began working with environmental nonprofits and hasn't looked back. You could elaborate on that for us more later. He worked for nearly 13 years with Friends of Nevada Wilderness, then with Great Basin Institute, Keep Trucking Meadows Beautiful, and Nevada Land Trust, before becoming the Toiyabe chapter director for the Sierra Club in February 2017. He lives in Reno with his wife, son, and Bo the dog. So with all that in mind, I was going to ask you, the one thing that's missing here that kind of humanizes people is, what do you like to do in your spare time? Or what was the last thing you would ever do in your spare time? Yes, and this is my segue over to Brian, so the podium is now yours.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Last thing I would do in my spare time, probably a stock car race on the theme of transportation. I'm really a nature, rocks, trees, mountains kind of guy. So thank you, everyone. It's great to see so many people, although honestly I can't see you anymore. That's my glass of wine. What are you doing? Really, that was mine, but that's okay. Now I don't know what to do. It's great to see everyone here for such an illustrious and important topic. Before we continue, I would like to call out, we have a few dignitaries in the audience, and at the risk of embarrassing you, and if that's the case, I apologize, we have CJ Manthe and Haley Williamson, who are both commissioners for the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. They steer the ship. Their job is to help implement everything that you come up with tonight in your question and answer period. So no pressure at all. I'd also like to give a shout out to Lynn Barker, who wasn't, who is Reno's Sustainability Director and who is the backbone and spine behind so many great sustainability measures in Reno. So anyway, let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. And really, it's all about energy. And we live, as you all know, in a great time of transition. So let's talk a little bit about that. This funny map with all of the circles is a map of all of the 270 coal-fired power plants that have closed or announced retirement since 2010. We have 232 power plants to go. This map shows 407 mayors who have signed the Climate Mayor's Pledge to uphold the commitments to the Paris Agreement. If you extrapolate this, and thank you, Mayor of Reno, Hillary Sheevy, for being on that list. And if you extrapolate that worldwide, there's more than 9,200 cities that have made a commitment to uphold the Paris Accords. Next map. We are among 140 cities, 7 states, including, in addition, Puerto Rico and District of Columbia, which have adopted stronger goals to transition to 100% renewable energy by 2050. Thank you very much, Nevada Legislature and Governor Steve Sisolak. And so what this means is that these reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from the electricity generation sector are no longer the leading producer of greenhouse gas emissions and other toxins. It's now transportation, which you can see by the increasing pie slice in the yellow on the right. Now, at least in 2016 figures, 41% of our emissions in this state. So how do we tackle that? And to help us understand more about why this is important and how and what's happening in Nevada to address this, we have our esteemed panel of experts. And so let's get started. Tom, oh wait, I have panels of experts with introductions. So Tom, we'll get to you in a second. First, David Bobzien, who is the director of the Nevada Governor's Office of Energy. Mr. Bobzien holds a BA in Government and Politics from George Mason University, a master's in Public Administration with an emphasis in natural resources and public lands policy from Boise State. Before that, he spent 5 years as a Reno City Councilman. That was my attempt at math. I hope I got it right. Thanks partly to his leadership, Reno was the first city in Nevada to join the Climate Compact of Mayors, which convened the city's Climate Action Initiative group to build climate change, resiliency, and reduce the city's carbon emissions, and launched Re-Energize Reno, an ambitious program to improve building efficiency 20% by 2025. As part of the program, Reno became the first city in Nevada to adopt an energy benchmarking ordinance promoting transparency in building energy use to increase efficiency. Prior to David's service on the Reno City Council, he served 4 terms as an assemblyman representing District 24 in the Nevada legislature. He worked on a wide variety of issues, from conservation and clean energy policy, including net metering, renewable energy incentive programs, energy efficiency, and the Renewable Portfolio Standard. David lives in Reno with his wife Julie, sons Luca, Finnegan, David, and his daughter Carly. And when he's not thinking and talking energy, he loves being outdoors, running, backpacking, hunting, and fly fishing. He also coaches soccer and currently volunteers as a Cub Scout leader for his son's pack. David Bobzien. Next up we have Tom. Sorry to make you wait, Tom. And Tom tells me, Tom Polikalis, which he tells me is Greek for dangerously underslept and overcaffeinated. He is the Nevada representative of the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, where he advocates for energy efficiency as a tool to create jobs and economic development while also conserving resources and improving the environment. If you're curious about the economics of geothermal heat pumps, domestic solar water heating, at-home air infiltration control and insulation, Tom's your guy. Prior to joining SWEEP, Polikalis worked for rural electric cooperatives in Colorado and Nevada, promoting cost-effective energy efficiency programs over the last 15 years. Before that, at the Nevada State Energy Office Public Information Officer from 1990 to 91, and he became Nevada's first recycling coordinator in the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. He's also served as a lobbyist for Nevadans opposed to the MX, and as executive director and lobbyist for Citizens Against Nuclear Waste in Nevada. Tom earned a BA in economics from the University of Nevada, Reno, and undertook graduate studies in economics. Tom lives in Reno, his hometown, and spends his free time with his son. And finally, we have Lauren Rosenblatt. Lauren is a lawyer with regulated markets expertise, having variously defended and prosecuted parties in the securities, commodities, and electricity markets in both government service and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and in the private sector with Nevada Energy. Ms. Rosenblatt has been immersed for over 10 years in technology and policy developments in the wholesale and rural electric service that are reshaping business models, operations, and what energy equity means to customers. If you are ever at a cocktail party and you would love to have an animated discussion about the details of the legal, policy, operational, and business model issues pertaining to all aspects of electricity service and the current transmission in the rapidly evolving US energy markets, she's the one you're going to want to talk to. Lauren is here tonight as a principal with the e-centricity LLP, a Las Vegas consultancy, and the primary author of Electrifying Nevada's 21st Century Transportation System. That's a report you'll hear more about this evening, which will be covered. As an independent advisor, she is engaged with transportation concerns and also technology companies that are revolutionizing energy technologies. She is also the co-founder and director of the nonprofit Barrio Electrico, a solar development project formed after Hurricane Maria and designed to empower local rural communities in Puerto Rico to offer solar energy to their residents as an electric service alternative. Lauren has a bachelor's in civil and environmental engineering from Rice University and her JD from the University of Texas School of Law. She lives in Las Vegas, where she chairs the board of the Vegas Theater Company and enjoys making, with her husband, concrete furniture. That could be another topic for a future forum. But let's not get distracted. So I gave an initial introduction on some of the bigger picture reasons why we're here, but I would love it, Tom, if you would be willing to tell us more about the why electrifying transportation here in Nevada is important.
Thank you. Okay. I aim it right there, all the way to the top. These are technical issues, and yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Brian, and it's an honor and pleasure to be with my distinguished colleagues on the panel. They're truly experts. I consider myself more of a researcher that's really trying to get to some key reasons as to why we should electrify transportation. As a preamble, and this will be relevant to the discussion, my 14-year-old son asked me to remind you this. In America, you watch television. In Russia, television watches you. So the reasons why we should electrify transportation, if I'm aiming right. Okay, so SWEEP, we work on 6 states. Transportation is one of our key programs. The benefits to transportation on electrifying: local air quality, health costs. Come on, baby, give me one more. And that's it. Climate greenhouse gas reduction. And this is where, Brian, your ratepayer benefits, national economic benefits, and finally national security. Air quality. Sorry guys, there we go. One more. I may have to deputize somebody here pretty fast. This is a study that SWEEP undertook. My colleague Matt Frommer and others worked to identify the reduction in emissions from electric transportation in volatile organic compounds, more than 98% reduction, nitrogen oxides. This study is available. We get it to you, and if you'd like, I'm going to go as fast as I can as soon as I get caught up. And so this PowerPoint and any of the studies will be available as follow-up. In southern Nevada, it's even more important. Over half of the smog is coming from transportation, and low-income communities are more impacted from pollution than our other constituencies in the state. So this is just another graphic in terms of what electric transportation does in terms of reducing emissions. On the light-duty side of things, again, very comparable, that electric transportation is a key way to reduce nitrous oxide and others. On mass transit, RTC in northern Nevada and both in the south are looking at electric transportation. This is where the, again, my apologies. Brian, you want to give me a hand and see if you can move me through faster?
Just wave your hand and I'll...
Yeah, just go. I'll keep up. So health costs are something we don't think about as being tied to transportation policy. Go ahead, the next one. Asthma is prevalent in both ends of the state. Go ahead. And in terms of identifying what is the cost of health care, this was a bit of information I found from CDC, where $1,000 a year in terms of asthma costs, and so fundamentally we're paying for dirty air, and electric transportation is one way to help resolve that. So this was a shot at the Nevada legislature with an electric school bus, and thanks to the Public Utility Commission for the docket facilitating additional funding for electric transportation in the school sector. Climate change, I think this audience is already well familiar, and Brian already addressed, transportation is now the largest emitter. We don't have floods, but now we're impacted by wildfires. Economic benefits of EVs to Nevada. Air quality is an economic development tool. State of Utah has now identified dirty air as the single largest impediment to economic development. We're starting to face that in the state. Fuel costs savings can be an economic stimulus. I'll briefly mention the technology cluster development. A group called American Jobs Project identified batteries as a way, kind of like Silicon Valley, we have the opportunity of becoming Lithium Valley, and all the industries associated with Tesla and the supply chains are a huge economic development opportunity for the state. Nevada with lithium can be a fuel supplier, and we'll get into very briefly how EVs can facilitate tourism. Finally, I'll just mention very briefly that there are potential benefits to all ratepayers. So everybody has an interest. If you're not driving an EV, you should be thankful that Brian and others are driving EVs because it helps everybody within the state. Economics for consumers, electricity is the cheapest fuel available to Nevadans, corroborated by several studies. Go ahead. On the annual fuel savings, we're looking at anywhere from $500 to $1,000 of personal fuel savings when we switch to electric transportation. Operations and maintenance costs are lower, so that each individual driving an EV is going to get savings over time. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. So what is the EV equivalent, or excuse me, the mileage equivalent of driving an EV? You're talking about 100 miles a gallon over the life cycle of a cost. You're talking literally $10,000 that you'll have in your pocket as compared to more expensive gasoline. Keep going. And where you're at the pump, keep going. So this is where we get into the economics for the state. When we have, these are different, go ahead, one more back, sorry about that. So different levels of market penetration. Right now, we're at about 1% of cars on the roads being electric. When we get up to 1.8%, we're talking about aggregated fuel savings of some $13 million. And as we set targets and in various ways try to accelerate the transition to electric transportation, there will be more savings in consumers' pockets. And go ahead, Brian. The next, where do these savings go? Most of the time, and you can get into where the consumer dollar is spent, most of the time when modest income and middle income folks are saving money, it's going to go straight into the local economy, not on trips to Europe and so forth. Those local expenditures translates into additional jobs in retail and service sectors, so that's another key economic benefit. And this is a really cool slide, Brian. Go ahead.
Look at that.
Strangely hypnotic, yeah. So that's the goal, is to reduce imports of oil into the state and gasoline. Go ahead. Because we're not an oil and gas producer. Other states may have a different set of economic variables. Nevada does not produce much in the way of oil, so we're importing. We don't refine gasoline in the state. That's taking place in Utah and California. What we do have is the gigafactory. Go ahead. Next one. And we have lithium. I saw one study that said that Nevada's lithium potential could represent 25% of global supply. That may be optimistic, but it does represent a new potential industry for the state. Go ahead. EVs and tourism. Why? It's because California is the largest market in the United States. Californians, we'd like to have them come and spend dollars, whether it be in hotel rooms or out in the great outdoors. So you'll see a lot of hotel casinos, virtually everyone I know has installed EV charging stations, and now thanks to the State Energy Office's effort, we're getting electric charging stations, and also thanks to NV Energy, Valley Electric, Overton Power District, for facilitating ecotourism out in the rural parts of Nevada. Go ahead. More EVs on the road benefits all electric ratepayers. Since we've got the commissioners in the audience, I'm just going to make that assertion with a study that recently took place in the state of Arizona, identifying a very high rate of electric vehicle penetration, represented in their study $176 a year potential ratepayer benefit when they got EVs up to. So anyway, a topic of future conversation as we hope to explore. Go ahead. One of the keys to making EVs benefit all ratepayers is to fill in the valleys where we're not currently using electricity at night, and to come up with policies. And I think the NV Energy has a great time of use rate, and so there's opportunities of leveraging our electric system to be more economical by filling in the valleys, clipping peaks, and so those are the policy discussions that will be taking place, I'm sure, over time, and have actually already started to transpire. National economics, go ahead, Brian.
I didn't mean to do that. I just ruined everything.
No worries, no worries.
Hold on.
Good. So what has happened because of our federal policy that has been somewhat oil friendly, we have transferred, as T. Boone Pickens said, the largest transfer of wealth in human history out of Americans' pockets over to oil producing countries. So that was back, I think, in 2014. This is an aggregate $4.8 trillion of wealth transfer. It just staggers the imagination. That's just the price of oil. That doesn't include wars and military expenditures and so forth. So we want to keep dollars for transportation within the United States. I thought this was kind of a cool image with Burj Khalifa being put up against the Stratosphere Tower. Clearly they've got more money than they need. We should be building those things in southern Nevada, right? Next slide. I mean, I see that in Toronto. Right? This is where hundreds of billions of dollars really ought to be staying within the United States and helping Nevada. Electric transportation, electric misspelled. Just a scary reminder of history. Well, how did 9/11 get funded? Go ahead. During one of the great booms with the massive transfer of wealth, The Bin Laden Construction Company became very wealthy, some $5 billion in assets, and one of their family members, go ahead, Osama bin Laden was the mastermind, and that's Mohammed Atta, one of the 9/11. So to some extent, our energy policy impacted our security back then with the funding of terrorism. So we'll just kind of move forward. Iran, still in the axis of evil, still making a lot of money off of oil. This is where we go back to television watching you. So this is a really key, and I'll slow down just briefly. The Russian budget, from my research, they are balanced when oil is in the high 40s or $50 a barrel, meaning that Putin can afford super weapons. Go ahead and keep on going. Let's stop here, sorry. So the Russian budget at about $40, $45 a barrel, that's their sweet spot in order that they're not deficit spending. And if you go back to the Reagan years, economic pressure helped bring down the Soviet Union. My thesis, and this is my personal, not that of Sweep, is that by dropping the price of oil, we become more secure as a nation because we're not going to be funding the Russians, the Saudis, the Iranians, and other folks whose interests are not necessarily lining up with ours. We're not doing, not necessarily going into the specifics of what's happening in Ukraine or in Crimea, but they are spending a lot. They are putting pressure on the U.S. in a number of ways because they've got the money to do so because the price of oil is high. Next slide. So how do we lower the price of oil? Drill, baby, drill, syn fuel, biofuels, hydrogen, highly efficient vehicles, electrifying transportation we're talking about tonight. I suggest that there are additional costs to drilling, maybe drilling. Same way that I think this is the Deepwater Horizon. So electric transportation with what we have in Nevada with the 50% RPS, we can power transportation off of renewable energy generated in Nevada. I think that's a really compelling argument. Go ahead. And this, again, on the military side of things, this is, I found this in a Pew Charitable Trust study and a white paper with a former general, General Wald, saying the best way to bear, and if you can't see it, the best way is to reduce oil intensity or to bring to bear a diversity of fuels into the transportation sector. This is best achieved by the electrification of transportation. So the military is looking at electric transportation because electric tanks are safer. They don't blow up like a gasoline or a diesel fuel tank might. So this is a strategic military goal, at least of mine, hopefully of others. Let's get off of foreign oil. Let's quit sending money to people that don't like us. The previous slide, this shows the compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, where we need to get to. The vertical axis is millions of barrels of oil a year, and then those are the market penetration rates. What's really important when you get into compound growth is the first year, right? So it's like if you want to become a millionaire, it's the first $100 or $1,000 or whatever it is. It's the hardest to accumulate, so it's the hardest. What we do right now to get Nevada's market penetration of electric vehicles off the ground is going to impact us in 2022, 2025, and so forth. So all the policies being adopted at the PUC and the legislature and so forth, these are really critical, playing our part in getting the rest of the nation to follow suit and electrify transportation. The value proposition, $21 trillion of oil could be displaced by electric transportation in the aggregate. That's a great goal to shoot for. And then who would be against electric transportation? This is my personal opinion. Next slide. Okay, so these are the guys who are neither fans of the wolf pack, the rebels, or putting downward pressure on oil prices through electric transportation, right? So if we can get oil down to below $40 a barrel, that would be awesome. Two of the reasons, and this is my last comment, we can put huge economic pressure on the Russians when we get oil to that level, and then we also make certain, from the environmental standpoint, certain oil reserves, such as the tar sands of Canada and other places, they become economical at that level too. So whether you're an anti-Russian imperialist like I am, or an environmentalist like Brian is, getting the price of oil down is of paramount importance. So that's my presentation, a couple of thoughts that maybe you haven't encountered before. These are the whys, and if you've got other ideas, I'd look forward to chatting with you after the presentation and adding some other ideas into the presentation for the future. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
I'm a little nervous about following Polikalis' tour de force that we just experienced. Wow. I'm gonna be up all night yelling at NPR after.
Just be glad you're not on that slide.
I know. Be like Putin, shirt off on a horse, like. All right, what we're doing. So I have a slide deck too. I don't know if it's.
Yeah, just push.
Oh, just
the next
go.
arrow. Yep. Keep going.
Thank you, Tom Polikalis. Very good. Okay, so mine's really boring in comparison. I wanted to share with you tonight sort of a view from the administration, from Governor Steve Sisolak in particular, to set the stage for why this transportation electrification conversation is important. And if you all remember, like I do, the opening remarks in the State of the State last January on climate, the governor really sort of threw down the gauntlet as to what his priorities were vis-a-vis the climate issue, and pretty much just saying wasn't going to debate it, was something that we needed to work on, and was going to be a focus of his administration. So it's with great pride that I serve the governor as the director of the Governor's Office of Energy. I do have some employees here tonight. I have Mark Brady, and I also have Pat Malloy here that are after hours sticking around. They want to see some of this stuff, so kudos to the GOE team for being here as well. Thank you. And this is really grounded in the understanding that Nevada, unlike many states in the Union, has a particular climate urgency. You all know this, Las Vegas being the fastest warming city in the United States. This is a crisis that we're facing head on. Certainly the citizens of Nevada understand this as we're watching everything that's happening in California. We're understanding what the near-term implications are going to be for our fast-warming state. And I think we also understand that, as Tom pointed out, this is very much an economic opportunity for Nevada around the clean economy. So in March of this past year, the governor joined Nevada to the U.S. Climate Alliance. As of right around now, the Climate Alliance includes 24 states and 1 territory. The important thing to note about this, I think it's very relevant to the transportation electrification conversation, is that the Alliance represents 55% of the U.S. population, an $11.7 trillion economy, which is a lot of purchasing power, right? As well as 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we have the responsibility as Alliance states, and we have the power to send the market signals, change behavior, and really reshape how we do things across all aspects of the economy, but certainly transportation being a preeminent one of concern. Our principles that we have to abide by that we adhere to as part of the Climate Alliance is that despite what's happening in Washington, D.C., states are continuing to lead on climate change. State-level climate action is benefiting our economies and strengthening our communities, and states are showing the nation and the world. It is this concept of subnational governments on the world stage communicating that despite what's happening out of Washington, D.C., we are still in. Most of the country is still in when it comes to working on a global stage to deal with this global issue. So in accordance with the Climate Alliance, we are committed to implementing policies that advance the goals of the Paris Agreement. We are tracking and reporting progress to the global community in appropriate settings, and we are accelerating new and existing policies to reduce carbon pollution and promote clean energy development at the state and federal level, and that absolutely applies to our responsibility around transportation electrification. And now I got my Tom moment here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I do want to note, out of all of the fast and furious legislating that happened this last legislative session, for all of the focus, rightfully so, on Nevada's increase to the renewable portfolio standard, the bill that probably has the most impact over the long term for Nevada's climate efforts is SB 254 that came from Senator Chris Brooks, and that sets in statute targets around greenhouse gas reduction. So if you assume a baseline of 2005, the goal is for a 28% reduction by the year 2025, a 45% reduction by the year 2030, and 0 or near 0 by the year 2050. So this is very aggressive. It's in line with some of the more progressive states on climate. And so we now have our work cut out for us in that, as part of the legislation, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, in partnership with the Governor's Office of Energy and other agencies, needs to not only issue more frequent inventories of greenhouse gas emissions according to these various sectors: electricity production, transportation, industry, commercial and residential, agriculture, and land use and forestry, but also come up with a policy, going too fast there, a statement of policies that future legislatures can work off of to begin to achieve those long-term reductions. And this is very important, particularly as we get past our 2025 target of 28% reduction, which we're on track more or less to meet because of all the wonderful work that has happened on a bipartisan basis for many, many legislative sessions when it comes to the electricity sector. But things get a little more complicated after we get past that first one. Just for, by way of background, many of you know this, but I think this is always a good level set. This is a graphic that came from a fantastic article that appeared in the New York Times at the end of last year that was a state-by-state sort of look back on the various power portfolios, electricity sector portfolios by the states. And you can see for Nevada's, and I apologize, the tyranny of PowerPoint, you can't see the x-axis on the bottom showing the years, but you can definitely see a distinct drop-off in the coal swath through the retirement of coal plants and other policies, of course, supplemented in large part by natural gas, but you do also see just a little bit of an uptick in solar as you get out toward the end there. So 2015, 2016, 2017, and certainly that tranche is going to expand in the years to come, thereby benefiting our climate efforts in terms of greenhouse gas reduction. But it is not enough, because as you can see with this one, again, apologies for the x-axis, but that dotted line is sort of where we are right now, 2017. I will note this is draft data. This is hot off the press from the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. This is some of the data that's going to go into that first SB 254 report that is due at the end of the year, showing the profile of our emissions in Nevada across the various sectors. So the orange sector in the middle that you see had hit a peak in the mid-aughts and then is on a nice downward trajectory but then flattens out. That's the electricity sector. Below that in blue is the transportation sector. So this is another presentation of the data, slightly different calculations because it includes EIA data, but some other modeling inputs from the Division of Environmental Protection. Same sort of data that you saw from Tom earlier. So what it shows is that we're on track to hit some targets, but without some additional aggressiveness in the policy space, we're just kind of in this cruise mode, and we're going to have to find some more innovative solutions, technology-wise, policy-wise, et cetera, to kind of keep bending that curve to result in further reductions of greenhouse gases. All right, we're going to see if this works, and I apologize ahead of time if it does not. But how do we make this video go with this clicker? I don't even know if that's possible. So I'm going to blame Ann because I said, Ann, can we do sound and AV? She's like, yeah, we totally got this.
I didn't know.
Is this going to work? I should.
Jeff, is that going to work?
No.
All right, cool. What's that?
I said, are there any embedded videos?
And I
didn't hear that question. I'm sorry.
And I answered out of ignorance. So sorry.
Okay. All right. So basically, what this was about was like the cool, awesome. David's kind of boring as a presenter, so let's go to the audio, video, visual portion of this. For all of the discussion, and I will give my standard disclaimer that none of this is a product endorsement from the Governor's Office of Energy, the administration, but for all of the focus that we have in Northern Nevada in particular on Tesla and the corporate presence that we have here around the Model 3 and their cars, it really struck me as someone who watches a fair amount of sports, that early in the spring, I could not turn on a soccer game or a baseball game without seeing this Audi commercial about this poor guy who's like, I'm never going to drive an electric car. That's not for me because those batteries don't last and they don't work in the cold and they don't work in the weather and you can't find the charging stations or whatever. And so here's Audi presenting their pretty cool looking SUV offering in the electric space as a viable option. So to me, that signaled, okay, we keep hearing about the major auto manufacturers making plays in this space. Here is Audi making a sizable ad buy around the Audi e-tron line. And I'm still seeing that into, wait, someone's jumping me? Or, oh, you're trying to help me. You were like, maybe I can help this guy out and give him a video, maybe not. Okay, so there's that sort of Madison Avenue perspective on where I see the automakers in this space. But I think also, and this is a little bit nerdier, this came out over the summer, and BNP Paribas is probably like top 5 banking institution, financial institution in the world out of France. They came out with an amazing report, great read, even if you just read the executive summary, called Wheels, Wires, and Wheels. And they make a provocative analysis that, right now, solar and wind paired with electric cars provide up to 7 times more useful energy for mobility than gasoline on a dollar for dollar basis. So this is like, Tom's over here going, yeah. But so, the idea here is that from the investment started under the previous administration, really with the goal of forwarding Nevada's position as an electric vehicle state when it came to technology and economic development, also around tourism. The idea is that we, working with partners such as NV Energy, the rural electric co-ops, bring money to the table, find host sites to build charging infrastructure around 5 routes in the state. So Interstate 80, Interstate 15, US 95, US 93, and US 50. We are targeted for substantial completion of this project by the end of 2020, but we are actually making incredible strides in deploying these stations around the state. There's a map. There's no way you can see that. That's really not usable to anybody in the audience. You recognize the shape of the state, right? Maybe you can pick out the highways. Cool. Bunch of dots on it. Those are the charging stations. Okay. It is notable that we are part of a larger Intermountain West effort called Rev West, and this is fascinating because there's 8 Western states with some very divergent political profiles, perspectives on electrical, transportation electrification. You have some states, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, that are very much engaged in this effort of building out corridors for seamless EV travel around climate. You have other states, your Idahos, your Wyomings, that maybe are more just thinking about the tourism aspect of this, but the fact remains that these 8 Western states are working together and coordinating on building out a larger vision of an Intermountain West rural network for EV charging. And of course, this is similar to what Tom was talking about. It brings back to the Tesla Gigafactory and the opportunity around batteries in particular. Lithium batteries are now a top 10 export from Nevada. We're talking $3 million in 2015, all the way to $131 million in 2018. So it's big business in Nevada. And I believe that's it. So thank you so much.
David, thank you very much. And as a reminder, Lauren is the primary author of Electrifying Nevada's 21st Century Transportation System. That's her name. And that's the cover of the report. And you can find it online at the Governor's Office of Energy. And it's 120 pages of
60. No, there's some appendices.
But the appendices are like really, I think David's term was #nutritious, right? Like there's so much detail in this report. And so we'd like to invite Lauren to talk a little bit about that work, although she has decided to buck the trend. There is no PowerPoint. And so she would like to engage in a conversation. So Lauren will start with some initial comments, and then we'll grab those cards, and we'll start our question and answer period. So please, Lauren.
Can everybody hear me? Is the microphone on? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Whoa. Okay.
You can see me. I'm not sure I can see you. I mean, these two fine gentlemen to my left have given you quite a bit to think about. I'll just take a minute to mention the report and how it came to be. As Brian mentioned, I am with e-centricity, which is a Las Vegas-based consultancy. And last summer, in the summer of 2018, we were having a conversation with the then director of the Governor's Office of Energy, Angela Dykema, and I do believe she's in the audience. Yeah, there she is. What we were talking about at the time is the fact that then Governor Sandoval had charged that office with implementing the Nevada Electric Highway. And Director Dykema was able to see that there was a real connection between the energy policy that she was in charge of stewarding for the state and the growing load that would come about as the electric highway and electrification of the transportation system grew. Thanks to her foresight, we were able to engage in a conversation about whether the energy policy was an angle from which it might be worthwhile having a discussion on electric transportation, and she agreed that she would commission us to write a report to make those connections under the auspices of the Governor's Office of Energy. So we started down a path. I would say that the discussion started with the fact that transportation electrification seems to be a means to further many policies of the state of Nevada, and you have heard about them from Mr. Polikalis and Director Bobzien. And what you learned in their presentations is that Nevada is an energy hub. It wants to make renewable energy an economic pillar of this state. It wants to be an energy exporter. And also Nevada has had a policy of energy independence since the early 2000s after the California energy crisis. There are 2 regional transportation commissions that work very hard to stay on the cutting edge of transportation, and advanced transportation will be overwhelmingly electrified. And a lot of people who are talking about this progress in the mobility space and in the renewable energy space see the jobs and the economic development that flow from them. So we decided that the report was going to treat it as a given that we wanted to further transportation electrification because it seems so important for all of these issues that were already stated policies here in Nevada. And we went down the path of interviewing many different agencies and individuals who worked for the different agencies. And what we realized is that there are dozens of agencies and political subdivisions that touch on the subject of transportation electrification, from your Utilities Commission regulators who oversee the operations of the utility and the rates they charge, to the Governor's Office of Energy, who is in charge of making sure that we have renewable energy in the state and that continues to grow, to the regional transportation commissions and the political subdivisions that are responsible for our transportation systems and our clean air. Not to mention the air quality departments in each of Washoe and Clark County. And so the report became an action plan more so than a set of policies. And it explored, particularly for Nevada, if we have all of these agencies that touch on electrification, what specifically could they be doing to move transportation electrification forward? And if you take a look at the report, it has several objectives and action items for the different agencies and how the different agencies can work together to move the needle forward on both enabling the public to adopt electrified transportation and in creating the avenues for electrified transportation to come to be here in Nevada. So I'm not going to repeat all of the content of the report. It was mentioned that you can find it on the Governor's Office of Energy website, and I'll let you look at that and browse that as you see fit. The report has lots of answers in it, and I have continue to spend a lot of time in this space, and I have lots of answers about transportation electrification and how we can get there. But as I thought about this presentation tonight, it occurred to me that I'm not really sure what your questions are or what you think is important about transportation electrification, because it is broad in its scope and its reach. So with that, I'd like to open the floor up to the questions and hear what people have to say and what they want to know about.
As we're gathering questions, I'd also like to let everyone know that we have, speaking of Audi and that commercial that didn't work, we have a living commercial out in the parking lot, and we have two fellows from Audi who might be able to answer questions about their vehicle. And so feel free to ask. We also have Russell with Concept e-bikes. Who is out there in front. Is Russell here in the room? There he is. And so if your questions pertain to the like immediate logistics and practicalities of electric vehicles, feel free to throw those in, and these gentlemen will be happy to answer. But let's start. Okay. David, I think this might be for you. This question says, decreased gasoline purchases equals decreased fuel taxes. How do we pay for roads and highway infrastructure? How will EVs pay for road maintenance?
Okay, that is a very important question. There is an entire interim study around that, SCR3, that has had so far 2 working group meetings around the topic. Brian, I think you've been a part of that. Tom's been a part of that. There's a number of people in the room that have been a part of that. Trying to address that very topic, and I'm going to put some blinders on this one, or some guardrails, if you will, to say that you know, I'm going to offer my own perspectives. Certainly, the administration is watching this and engaging in this conversation. Both the Governor's Office of Energy, the Department of Transportation, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and other agencies, DMV, about what we think is the most prudent way forward as a policy for the administration. That said, some observations based on, in part, the time that I had in the legislature. The structural shortcomings of the existing fuel tax have been there for decades. And I think the moment that this nation started having conversations around fuel economy related to vehicles, it was clear that at some point this disconnect in use types and actual impacts to the roads and the need to pay for the infrastructure was going to be a problem. So I think if anything, flash forward to where we are in 2019, and certainly this came up in this last legislative session, there was a little bit of a, oh my gosh, there's all these EVs on the road. Well, my graph showed that it's 0.26% of the overall market penetration. Look, the problems with the gas tax have been the problems with the gas tax for quite some time. But yes, if we assume that in the future there is greater penetration on a mass scale of electric vehicles on the roadways, we are going to have to figure out a way forward. So there was legislative attempts around a vehicle miles traveled approach to a replacement for the gas tax. I think it's fair to say that legislature, the various interests from construction interests to consumer interests to environmental interests are grappling in a very serious way with this important question of what is the future of highway funding, highway infrastructure funding in an electrified future. And so there are no easy answers to this just yet, but there's definitely a very active conversation about how to move forward on this. And I do think that this interim committee will come up with some recommendations to the next legislative session as to how we make that adjustment to properly account for highway infrastructure funding.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a couple other questions that pertain to the specific logistics, and practicalities of owning an electric vehicle. So I would like to invite Marcos up here from Audi. The first question is, why can't the fast chargers charge fast to 90% instead of 80%?
That's never enough.
And the second question would be, I just read something like 74% of automobile dealers don't have EVs in their showrooms. When can we start seeing more of them?
Okay, well, hello, my name is Marcos. I've been at Audi since 2012, so I've been around the brand for a long time and pretty knowledgeable on the EV aspect of it. So the first question, the reason why anybody that's going to bring out a EV is not going to allow a charge max to, let's say, 100%, is for that life efficiency of that battery. So in our vehicle, on the e-tron, you use only 83% of that battery capability. So you're never going to use 100% because of longevity. So that's why we offer an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on that battery, and that keeps, it still gets you pretty good range. If it was 100, like your phone, after 2 years, you're replacing it, right? Because the battery's going down. You don't want to do that to your car. So that's kind of how we view it. I'm sure that's how Audi views it. And secondary, the second question about 74%. All I can talk about is our dealership and our product line. Audi has made a commitment to have 1/3 of their inventory or cars that they build be EV of some sort, whether it's a hybrid with an engine, electric, or a full electric vehicle. The e-tron is our freshman effort. I tell people all the time. I do get the questions of people coming in and want to talk about Tesla this, Tesla that. We're not Tesla. We created an Audi, and it happens to be electric. So the quality build in our vehicles is an Audi. So when you jump into one, whether it's 10 years old and now you jump into a new one, you're going to see the quality build. And as we mature with it, we'll get a little better. Right now, Tesla has everything. They had all the technology, but we're coming. So,
Am I on? Okay. Just a word about those battery management systems. They do more than regulate the use of the battery in your car and ensure that the battery can meet the warranty. They eventually will allow for interaction with the electric grid so that charging rates can be managed on the utility operator side to fluctuate with demand on the grid. This allows for the utility to manage how much draw is coming from the grid from electric vehicles driving around town and charging at times of day when we might also want to be turning lights on and powering our air conditioners. And by doing so, it keeps the total capacity that the utility needs to have on hand available. If the utility is able to manage the battery, essentially the battery charging of your electric vehicle from the utility charging side, and thereby reduce the amount of capacity it has to have on standby for those peak periods, then it brings the cost of electricity down for all of us, because the capacity on standby can be very expensive, especially when the margins are high. So that is in fact the dream, and some of the bells and whistles inside these electric cars are looking towards that future.
Brian, quick comment, just
Quick shout out to NV Energy. If you've not driven an electric vehicle, there have been some ride and drive events that the utility has put on, 2 in October. I'm hoping that the next 2 will be following their cycle in the springtime. So look for those. Had the chance of driving half a dozen electric cars with no pressure sales whatsoever just to get the experience. So want to provide that as a thought for the future.
If you haven't tried an electric vehicle, the acceleration is pretty amazing. Just saying. So this question has probably been answered, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway because someone took the time to write it. Does NV Energy offer any kind of discount for charging your cars? And is charging cheaper at night? And Lauren, I think you said that.
Yes, NV Energy has a time of use rate specifically for electric vehicle owners. And one day they'll separate out the meter for your car charging with your house. They don't do that currently. But the idea is to encourage you to charge at night when a lot of people are not using electricity. Again, that uses, it's the same principle I just remarked upon. It uses the capacity that's on standby, which makes the system overall more efficient for all of us and puts downward pressure on our rates. NV Energy came out last year with a commercial vehicle charging rate for fleets that has some interesting aspects of encouraging the conversion of fleets to electric, including removing demand charges. That's a technical term I won't bore you with. But the point is that the utility and the commission are working together on these tariffs so that they're fair and equitable to people who have these cars.
And a related question, please talk about how we can use solar panels on our house to power our cars.
Well, I know the answer to this. I don't want to disappoint you. You really can't. So what you can do with solar panels on your roof is you can put the energy into some kind of storage device, and you can charge your car from a storage device at times of day when, if you are drawing from the grid, your rate might be higher. That gets back to your time of rate use. The problem with charging directly from solar panels today is that it takes a lot of solar panels to give you the volts and the current you need to charge your car as fast as you'd want to. So while the solar panels could be an energy offset for the energy you're pulling from the grid and thereby reduce the cost of the fuel you're putting in your car, a direct solar panel to charge car battery charging is not quite technically feasible yet. But there are a lot of people who are working on that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let's go back to Tom's compelling sides about the price of oil. Someone asks, won't getting the price of oil down encourage more people to drive gasoline-powered vehicles? And how low does the cost of oil have to go before it becomes too expensive to pull it out of the ground?
It's a great question. Anytime in economics you lower the price of something, there is what they term an income effect. So price of electricity goes down as it has. Are you suddenly going to buy a larger refrigerator? So there's a balance point too. So overall, net economic benefits trend towards lowering the price of oil in general is a net economic stimulus for the country. Also, there are losers in that equation too. So if you happen to have an uncle named J.R. Ewing, or if you own oil wells, so there are folks, it's not everyone benefits. Net-wise, what we're trying to do is really highlight the operating cost savings. So cost of electricity is stable, and actually in Nevada has been declining a bit, which is amazing. So we're not going to displace the on order of 3 times as efficient electric motor by getting oil really, really cheap. So that's a not well said answer to the question, is that electricity will remain less expensive than gasoline pretty much no matter how low the price of oil goes. I mean, you'd have to get to just absolute 20, I won't even speculate. It's just the operating cost savings of electricity, it by far outweighs what we can get to in an ideal world. You know, getting to $40 a barrel would be great. That doesn't really erode the benefits of electric transportation. You still may want to have, in fact, I'm assuming we're talking about just trying to get to 5%, 10%, 20% market penetration of electric vehicles. We're not going to get to 100% for decades to come. So again, just want to encourage those early adopters to take a look at going electric as soon as possible. That'll help accelerate the decline of battery costs and make, again, electric transportation the more compelling option for more people. I hope that at least got into the ballpark if didn't get a base hit.
And while we're on the topic of national security, what happens if someone, terrorists perhaps, target our electrical grid?
They are.
I mean, I think that's not necessarily new news. I think that the grid is a security risk. Pretty much there's a lot of information out there where Russians and others have access to, so no matter what, the threats to the grid exist. And Lauren may jump in on this, but I think that electric transportation provides some opportunities to be a little bit more grid resilient with the emerging technology of vehicle-to-grid technology, so that you can store electricity in vehicles. So it's a very complex question, but still it's worth going to electric transportation, particularly up to the 10–20% level. It's just...
Actually, could we go into a little bit more depth on that grid tie with electric vehicles? So you're talking about storing energy in vehicles and then plugging them into your home to power the grid? Is that where we're headed?
It's an emerging technology.
Put it that way. You want to jump into that's?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Tom. It's the resiliency benefits are a great promise of transportation electrification, because the distributed storage becomes a source of energy when there's an outage. It might reduce the utilities' need to buy capacity at a distance if people have cars sitting at work or at their houses that they can charge, that they can plug into in the middle of the day, and the utility can bilaterally pull from the vehicle instead of putting energy into it. And on top of that, one very interesting application of these batteries, particularly in school buses and public transit, the very large batteries, is that in emergency situations, they might not only be used to help with the grid, but could be deployed to, say, a hospital or some other critical facility to offer a few hours of power until grid can be restored.
Go ahead.
I guess I just jump in on that, in that, Lauren really sort of painted the picture of the future of this idea of where transportation electrification fits in the future of the grid. And if you think of a more distributed, resilient electricity grid, benefited by having large numbers of these batteries kind of distributed everywhere that a grid operator can call upon in times of need, et cetera. Overall, the resiliency that's built in, really provides a lot of benefit and a lot of promise. In terms of I've heard this, like, well, grid goes down, what happens? You can't drive your car, we'll always have gasoline. If anything, we have a classroom happening next door in California right now over many recent weeks, and anecdotally, I've talked to folks that are sort of living through the shutoffs. Certainly, counterparts that we have, whether it's I know the Public Utilities Commission talking to their counterparts in California, our office talking to counterparts there. There's a lot of after-action opportunity to kind of look at what was happening during those shutoffs in terms of how was it impacting, ratepayers, grid users, EV drivers, et cetera. I will point out, and this has been the subject of news, but it's been an issue facing our office, is that with each public safety power shutoff that happens, the main fuel supply line to northern Nevada has been going down because of Kinder Morgan's pipeline that goes roughly following I-80 over the Sierra, delivering Jet A, diesel and gas to northern Nevada. That has been going down each time the shutoffs happen. So it's really hard to untangle all these various energy sources. And if the overall vision and direction is a more resilient energy system, not just electricity grid, I think it still points that transportation electrification is still really the way to go as we continue to face those challenges in the future.
One last jump in on resiliency.
If I could, I think it was Commissioner Breslow who had identified a certain amount of money that now is being administered by our current commissioners for energy storage in addition to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So there are incentives from NV Energy for batteries, which are worth exploring, particularly in critical facilities. So if anybody's got a commercial business, or even I think that the storage incentives, I believe, are available for residential consumers too. So Lisa may correct me on that. There is information from NV Energy out on the front table, and Lisa was here. I'm just staring into the, specific questions should go to Lisa on those ways that we can increase the resiliency of the grid through incentives and rebates.
And David, just to clarify, the pipeline bringing fuels to Nevada shuts down because the pumps in that pipeline are electric.
Correct. Pumps were de-energized multiple times. There have been arrangements made kind of on the fly for backup power for those from diesel generation, but there's a lot of gained experience and knowledge that's been happening, and it'll be really interesting as policymakers untangle that both in California and elsewhere, looking at that experience over the past many weeks, knowing that these situations are going to continue into the future.
So if we can bring more electric vehicles into our lives, and if we can create tie-ins between those vehicles and our houses, people in California, and if it happens here with these rolling blackouts, will be much more resilient, potentially, right? Refrigerators.
I would argue yes. And I guess, totally, and again, I think people will be looking at what happened and trying to make their own assessments, but I sort of look at it from an individual consumer perspective. It's like, well, my car's been charging all night. I'm good to go. You look at a longer time horizon and the inconvenience perhaps of trying to find that charging station elsewhere that's not part of a shut-off territory may become difficult. But again, you got a whole bunch of batteries out there that are ready to go and ready to give juice.
Excellent, thank you. So moving forward, who will fund the electric highway infrastructure?
There's so many layers to that question, but it's always a good one. Who pays? And well, I'm going to throw out a question to the audience. How many people here tonight have taken a bus in the past week? Raise your hand. Oh, one person, two. Oh, I see a few. Okay, great. How many people have cast a vote in a local election based on a transportation issue that was personal to them? Okay, a few. What you have in this panel tonight is a bunch of energy wonks, and the promise of electrified transportation is great for our energy future and for resiliency and national security and some of the other issues we've been talking about. But fundamentally, it is a transportation issue. And a lot of what's going to happen in this space is going to be driven by our transportation policy and the decisions that are made by our transit providers. This is why the conversation that Director Bobzien mentioned a little bit ago about the vehicle tax becomes so very important, and it's quite contentious here in Nevada. People don't fully understand why the gas tax is not working. Well, our cars get more and more efficient, and so the revenues aren't as high. But what the gas tax was always meant to do was tax you for the number of miles you drive in your car and the weight of your vehicle. Gas usage is a loose proxy for that. Vehicle miles traveled does the same thing. It taxes you for your road usage based on the number of miles you traveled and approximately how heavy your vehicle is. Now, by the way, a battery in a Tesla Model S is 1,200 pounds. So electric vehicles pay a little bit more on the vehicle miles traveled if the weight of the vehicle is being taken into account. But the point I'm trying to make is that the tax deficit that we have facing this nation is it's a scary deficit, because we can't do without our roads. We need to be able to get from A to B. And it's not just our roads, it's also our public transit and the other aspects of moving around town and from city to city policy that get funded by these dollars. And we have to understand that there's always going to be a public tax to keep these resources available to us. And we need to understand it well enough so that we can cast our vote and help the politicians and the policymakers decide how to do it. So I do believe, again, that transportation dollars are going to be a main driver in this space. And this is my public service announcement, or my plug, for you all to be part of that conversation, because it's very difficult to know what the answers are, and there's a lot of speculation as to what people are afraid of when it comes to the vehicle miles traveled tax or changing the tax regime for a new vehicle technology. And that requires you all to get engaged and tell the people who are making those decisions what you think about it.
I guess I would offer to that as supplement to Lauren's remarks, because I think we're very spot on. When it comes to the models around paying for charging and paying for charging infrastructure, I think it's fair to say that we're in a great unsettling period where that stuff has to sort itself out. But if you put it in a historical context of how other great technological shifts came about and how the business models surrounding them in their various spaces had to evolve, I don't think transportation electrification is any different. If you think of early public engagement in many of these technologies that helped sort of ignite the technological evolution, bring the cost down, et cetera. I mean, look, there's a lot of reasons why solar PV is so stinking cheap right now, and renewable energy is so cheap right now. It's because there were, at the outset, very, competitive policies that did that first bit of driving the price down and driving the technology. So if you think of, the early RPS compliance contracts that were signed, they were at a higher price point. But now that, that has, we've gone through that, the incentives have worked and the prices come down. And so I think that a lot of the work, for instance, that our office is doing around the Nevada Electric Highway is complementary to the private sector seeking to understand what their role is going to be in providing and investing and managing infrastructure. So, do I think the Governor's Office of Energy is going to be running, EV charging stations 10 years from now? Nope, I don't think so. I think if anything, we're putting the pieces on the table, the puzzle pieces on the table for others to think about what is the best optimal way to do it. Is it the utilities? Is it the gas companies? Manufacturers, Tesla seems to think it's the manufacturers. They're making their play on they're going to own the infrastructure, but all of that is going to sort out, and so we'll just have to kind of wait and see where things go.
Quick extension or echo Lauren's comment about public engagement, just public service announcement that the Interim Legislative Committee on Energy will be meeting this upcoming Friday. That'll be the full committee, not the focus task force that Director Bobzien alluded to. But so Friday the 15th at the legislative building, there will be the first of several meetings by the Interim Legislative Committee. Just encourage folks, citizen participation in the policies that Director Bobzien had addressed, been instrumental. So just really want to encourage people to get involved in that process and play a part in advocating whatever you think is going to contribute to the state's future. Last, going back to kind of the dichotomy of electric transportation versus fossil fuel, we're not going to suddenly go by next year, within 5 years, from fossil fuel based at what was the whatever 100% minus 0.26%. I mean, to get to 5% is a huge lift, right? Once we get there, then there'll be ample opportunities to see where we're at and to reassess. But kind of a parallel with the renewable portfolio standard, we'd like to encourage people to consider a standard for low emission vehicles and zero emission vehicles to help get that initial wave, or that first beachhead, if you will. Once we can get up to 1%, 2%, 3%, working out of a marketing department, we know that as soon as we can get up into those higher percentages than we are now, then there's going to be more momentum built. We want to encourage those policies to be taken a look at too. So there'll be some information available at the interim committee on energy will have some handouts. I think there's a few that are out on the front table on the LEV, what's low emission vehicles are termed LEV, zero emission vehicles are ZEV. So the LEV-ZEV discussion is something that we want to start engaging with the public on too.
I'll just add one more point about who pays. Part of it depends on how it's rolled out. I mean, if you see that the public transit fleets and the school buses are going to electrify first, then obviously there's going to be tax dollars that are put into infrastructure and some of the bells and whistles required around making sure those buses can get from A to B. If you think it's going to be the commercial sector and commercially available services to the public, for example, transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft who are going to roll out electric fleets, then arguably they're the ones who should be making the investment. And one creative way to do that would be a tax regime that ensures that the revenues collected get distributed back to creating a public charging network that those ride-hailing services can use, or that works for them in the way that they provide services to us.
If I may add just one more echo on the public engagement side. So in 2021, we're going to have our legislature again. And by the time we get there, the discussions have already ended. They already know more or less what bills will be introduced. And now is the time to engage with the interim committees, to have those discussions, to make your requests for policies so they can take the time to think them through and come up with a really solid bill to introduce. If you wait until February of 2021, it might be too late. Boy, there's a lot though in there. And so, Lauren, you talked about transit, and so we have a few questions. Where does public transit lie in this whole spectrum of activity? What's happening to commercial trucking? Electric trains, are they part of our vision for the future? Tell us about electric school buses. Is anything happening around those? And other trains, maglev, like all of these things beyond individual vehicles, do they have a role in Nevada?
The human brain can only hold 7 items in its head at one time, so you may have to go back and remind me of some of the questions that you just recited. But, and the first one was? Okay, so, you know, transit is really interesting and it's finding its way. Advanced transportation, when you think of autonomous and connected vehicles, they will be overwhelmingly electric because that's where the manufacturers want to take that technology. It's got advanced computers, advanced communication systems, and it's just autonomous vehicles right now, by and large, are being manufactured as electric. So there will have to be infrastructure to support that when those mobility options become realistic. But when you think about electric buses today, the real reason for electrified buses is not because it makes better bus service. The buses go on the same routes, they take you where you need to go, and if they're more expensive, then they may cut into the operating expenses that are required to satisfy all the routes that are currently being provided. The reason for electric buses, a little bit of noise reduction, but mostly air quality. And for the transit buses in particular, there have been a lot of noble efforts, including by RTC Washoe here, to demonstrate the viability of those buses and show that they can meet our needs with a low emission technology. But there are other ways to get to clean air with that heavy transportation. For example, Southwest Gas is working down south to deliver renewable natural gas, which is natural gas based on biofuels and also delivers a zero emission fuel. It can do it with current CNG technology, CNG vehicle technology, and CNG infrastructure technology. So just because we see value in electrified transportation, I think we have to remember the purpose for which we want to deploy it and recognize that sometimes there are alternatives alternatives that may be cheaper. Now, school buses is a different story. There's not a lot of CNG school buses available on the market. I do think Bluebird makes a model. It's kind of expensive. And the school districts don't have the fueling that the RTCs can put in place. On top of that, the electric bus proposition is much more attractive to school buses because they go out in the morning and then they sit through the midday, and they go out just a little bit in the afternoon. And a lot of them are not driving at the times of day when we all get home and start cooking dinner and turn on our TVs and our air conditioning and through the evening. And they can put cheap power that they had collected at times when the grid was not at capacity back on the grid when the grid money for the school districts. So there, it could make lots of sense. Now, the school districts in Nevada, as some of you may have heard, they're facing some challenges, particularly with funding, and trying to sort out the opportunities that they have is probably not high on their priority. But I do know that both Washoe County and Clark County are starting to look at it. Now, I think there was a question about trucking.
Trucking and trains.
Okay, so the high-speed trains, trains tend to be electric. Amtrak has its own electric system back east. Bullet trains that you hear of coming out of Asia and Europe, those are electric. I think the train that's gonna, the Virgin train, I don't know if you two know much about that, but I think that's supposed to be electric. No?
Florida.
In Florida, it's electric? They're out of Florida. But the train, but they're going to build a train from Las Vegas to LA, right? Okay. I mean, trains have been electric for a long time, and that makes a lot of sense. Some of them even have their own infrastructure. There's an interesting use of a train to create electricity, and there's one project here in Nevada where they again, fuel the train with electricity during times when electricity is cheap, and then they roll the train down the hill and collect the kinetic energy from the train and put it back on the grid when it's most needed. I'm not sure that that particular project is as economically viable as its developers want us to believe, but it's kind of interesting and fun. And trucking, heavy-duty vehicles require heavy batteries. And Tesla's about to announce its light-duty truck, and it came out with its semi. But the weight, I'm not really sure how they get the weights on these vehicles low enough to travel on our roads, which comes back to road funding. Our roads break down when the trucks are too heavy. And these batteries, has anybody here ever lifted just a lead-acid battery that you had in your garage? I mean, they're heavy. These lithium-ion batteries are much bigger and much denser.
And on that, I can't remember what the bill number was, but the legislature did pass a bill this year allowing for heavier trucks to accommodate those heavier batteries. It doesn't do anything about the road damage, but at least we're thinking ahead about allowing those heavier vehicles. And legislature also passed Senate Bill 299, which creates a pilot project for electrifying schools and electric school buses. It's not a lot, but at least we'll be able to get a pilot project or two. And Carson City School District is one of the main contenders in pursuing that funding. All right. Well, right, it's great. While Marcus has been here standing very politely, I'll throw out a couple more questions for him. And folks, we're almost done. We've just got a couple more questions to go. What is the realistic time to charge vehicles at home, on the road, with low and high capacity charges? And maybe others can take this too. And do electric vehicles charge themselves on downhill runs?
Okay, all right, let's start with the first one. Just speaking on Audi's side, the vehicles that we have delivered, people are plugging them in at a certain time at night, whether it be 1 to 5, 1 to 6, and they have something going on with NV Energy that helps them. It's less money per kilowatt. So our charging system, we have 3 different charging systems. The home system takes about 7 to 8 hours to charge. So the best time to do it is obviously at night where it's more efficient. And that is something that's constantly going on now. And then, what was the second question?
Downhill.
Downhill, yes. Okay. So in our car, we have 2 different, essentially decelerating modes. So you can use the braking system, and the harder you press, the more it regenerates, or you can use the paddle shift system that actually does it for you, where you're not using the brake, you're just using the actual pedal system that it's doing it for you. That tends to create faster charging. So for instance, from the dealership to here, which is, I don't know, 20 some odd miles, it took me, the vehicle had 215 miles of range. It has 204 right now. So that took 10 kilowatts or whatever of charge to get here. On a car, it's probably going to be more. So a kilowatt is probably about 2.4 miles per kilowatt. So something like that. So something, you know.
Okay, we're getting close to the end. We have a couple questions about the environment. In terms of air quality and climate impact, should we be focusing on electrifying buses or cars?
Yes.
Good answer. Hold on here. What is the plan with the disposal of batteries, and what will happen to the lithium toxins?
You know,
The fact of the matter is that a lot of these batteries can have a second life, and they can be used for other purposes after they come out of the vehicles. But eventually there will be a disposal problem, and in the first instance there's a mining problem. You think about the amount of storage that's required for these cars, and even the amount of storage that's required for a solar plus storage project that's powering the grid, that is in turn powering your cars. And reliance on a single rare earth mineral like that actually puts us in a rather scary position, as Tom has pointed out. So we not only have the, I think we need to have some sensitivity around how many lithium-ion batteries we're depending on for transportation and just for electricity needs, but also what's going to happen to it in the long run at the end. And they don't have a real viable scrapping method now. There's, like I said, there's a lot of second life that our batteries are not being directed towards, and we need to do more in the circular economy to take advantage of that. But we should be thinking about the longer term and our garbage dumps as well.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I think my own conversations with folks in the industry, you know, Tesla in particular, would certainly agree with Lauren that there are a lot of opportunities for the second life of the batteries. You know, we're really at sort of the start of, and again, not to focus on Tesla, but just because of, you know, having conversations with them, you know, with the Model 3s and the higher penetration of those vehicles in the market, you know, it's safe to say that, you know, 8 years from now or so, they're going to start having these batteries where it's like, okay, they're definitely falling off in performance. What do we do with them? You know, they're confident that there are these secondary applications, whether it's power walls or you know, other stationary batteries, again, as distributed grid resources that will still provide you know, usefulness to that battery going forward. But you know, Lauren's right. At some point, yeah, you're gonna have to figure out the disposal piece. And she's also right about the global supply chain implications of, you know, lithium and what that means, whether it's, you know, rare earth minerals or you use the term strategic minerals. Yes, we have a lot in Nevada, but you know, it's basically one mine, a second one about to come on. None of that right now is sourced by Tesla or Panasonic for their battery products. You know, they're looking elsewhere, you know, to the Congo, to China, to, you know, other countries. Some of those countries we may not have the best, you know, relationships with. And so what that means, I would say, is sort of, you know, counter to the warnings earlier about, you know, who you're doing business with in the, you know, the oil economy. I think we're going to be facing some of those questions and those hard decisions about foreign policy related to strategic minerals into the future. I would also say, as someone who has a public lands conservation background, that I absolutely understand the concerns, the potential pressures for greater development of those resources across public lands in the West and what that means. And it's something that I think about all the time. I also think a lot about, again, the climate imperative of what are those trade-offs and where should we be headed overall for the planet. And I'm going to come down on the side of yeah, we need some batteries, we need transportation electrification.
Last, or at least segue, technology is improving not only in lithium ion but a number of other technologies, and if I can maybe channel some of the research that I don't have off the tip of my tongue, but vanadium flow, a couple of other technologies, I've seen something even getting into aluminum, and so 5 years from now, the situation may be greatly different than it is now. It's one of the areas of technology that's advancing the most rapidly that I've seen, with cost declines and so forth. Certainly echoing their comments, I believe Nissan has an aftermarket program for vehicle batteries and makes a great complement for solar photovoltaics. So some emerging business opportunities may evolve, and I believe there is a company starting to work on recycling of lithium ion. I will do some research, get it to Ann and Brian, and perhaps they can share it with you.
Thank you. So I think this is the time for final statements. Your vision for the future. Lauren, your prompt was next steps for sustainability. I don't know how narrow that is for you, but maybe each of you could just offer a few comments on what you see happening next, what gives you hope, where do we go from here?
Do you want to go first or last?
So, I guess I'll jump right in. I think particularly recognizing that we have a number of folks in the audience that have a long and admirable history in advocacy around clean energy issues, and very much appreciate and celebrate your work, because you are responsible for so much of the progress that Nevada has made as a clean energy economy leader. For all of the emphasis that we have had around renewable energy, the renewable portfolio standard, and sort of those touchstone issues that have really been a part of everyone's thinking around legislative sessions and elections and advocacy and everything else. We are now in this great pivot of, look folks, the electricity sector was easy compared to a lot of the challenges that are yet to come in terms of greenhouse gas emissions in these other sectors, and transportation really is the next one. I think Lauren stated it very importantly that transportation electrification may not be the ultimate solution for every class and every application of transportation. There are other lower emitting technologies that we need to be looking at, but trying to figure out what those policies are and then ultimately advocating for those policies so that we can continue to make progress in these other sectors now. That's the great pivot, and I think that's the one that everyone has to think about. That we've made a lot of progress on renewable energy. Now we have to look at the rest of the puzzle, if you will.
I would just say be engaged on some of these complex issues, because your elected officials, your regulators, your policymakers like Director Bobzien, they don't have all the answers, and it's nice to know what the public's thinking. As I pointed out from the report, it assumed all of the benefits of transportation electrification, and then it prescribed action items that different agencies could take. But which agency takes the lead depends on where Nevada places its priorities. Do we think transportation electrification is mostly about independence from fossil fuels, or clean air, or advanced mobility? What is our choice? And then from there, I think we can drive forward these solutions in a way that makes sense to us, in a way that we can support economically. But it takes you participating in your democracy to help the people who make decisions sort it out.
My last request, if you will, would be to have you continually engage, not continually engage, but engage again. So don't make this the one shot on information for electric transportation. Next time you have an opportunity, whether it be at an NV Energy event or Earth Day or anything like that, get behind the wheel, have that personal experience, maybe even go online and see what the costs are. Some of the oil industry folks are saying that EVs are for the rich. Meanwhile, I'm taking a look at used Nissan Leafs that are available for $5,000, and your fuel savings might pay for that and be a great second car. So just keep on going. If my contact information, shoot additional questions. If there's anything that I put up on the screen or you disagree with, let's continue the discussion. And this size group is sufficient, I believe, to change state policy. So we'd really like to have the continued interaction with you. Both, if you disagree, that's good to know, and why. We'll try to resolve those issues. But really, we want to also, I think, thank you for being here tonight. It's clearly very important to the three of us, and to Ryan, thank you for investing your time. It's been a fabulous opportunity to share our thoughts.
Thank you. Unless there are any burning questions, thank you everyone for coming out, and I look forward to the next one.